Hey everyone, you're listening to the Fierce Feminine podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Harrison from melissacatherineharrison.com. In the near decade I've been coaching powerful women, I found one of the biggest problems we face is not trusting our intuition and acting on it enough, not trusting ourselves enough. More fulfillment, more enjoyment, and more success always follow when we trust the intuitive nudges. So what stops us, and how can we tune in more? On this show, I sit down with incredible women to discuss their take on this, examples of them following the nudges, and the strategies they take so we can all do the same and rise together. I'm so glad you're joining us. Welcome back to the Fierce Feminine podcast. Today I have with me Rachael Farley. Rachael, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Sure, of course. Like I've told you before, I really stand behind your message and what you're trying to get out in the world, so I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you. So to start us off, can you share a little bit about your family of origin, how you grew up, anything, your personal background that you're willing to share with us?
How much time do we have? Okay, so I'm a New Hampshire woman, kind of born and raised. I grew up in a split family, so parents divorced very young. Both parents remarried, both parents divorced, so I've had some step siblings come in and out of my life. Had my fair share of childhood trauma that I've paid quite a lot in therapy to be working through over the last decade. You know, 80s kid, raising a family now in the 2020s, and it's a whole new world. So I have been married and divorced. I'm currently remarried, intend to be forever. And I have 3 biological children. I have a stepdaughter now. So we have 4 children in the house, ages 9 to 14. So we are kind of a wild bunch. So there's 6 of us living at home. Have been running a real estate business for about 8 years and about 10 people on my team at this point. So it really is a circus every single day between organizing my work family and my family. And we're in a business of people, and that is a revolving door. So it is as controlled of the chaos as I can get it. So that's kind of my life in a 30-second blip.
I love it. As controlled chaos as I can get it. That's perfect. So you have your own real estate practice now. What did you do before that?
Yeah, so kind of followed the prescribed path in life. So from very early on, did the good grades so you can go to a good college type of deal, and worked really hard at that in my younger years. Ended up going to UNH for business after trying 3 other majors in between, but that's a side story. So finished UNH with 5 years, again, 3 different degrees along the way, but ended up going to SNHU and got a master's degree in marketing. So I worked a little bit in mortgages right out of college, then went into marketing and worked for different tech companies for a number of years until I was unceremoniously fired from my job after I was recently divorced and my kids were 2, 4, and 6 years old. So I found myself unemployed, recently divorced, 3 little babies at home, and decided at that point that if I worked just as hard for myself as I'd done for everybody else my entire life, I was bound to be successful. I'd always loved real estate. I'd had my real estate license, but had done nothing with it, and decided this was the time to start trusting in myself. And so that is when I went for it.
Amazing. God, I love that. So good. So I would imagine that there have been several times in your life, given all of the changes you've experienced, that you've had to rely on your intuition to get you through some things, that things seemed crazy, but your gut told you one thing and you knew you had to listen. Would you mind sharing a couple of those times with us?
Yeah, I mean, that very example of when I'd lost my job and deciding to go into a commission-based lifestyle, nobody would have told me that that was the right thing to do. Even myself, I was like, no, You get a good paying job, you climb the corporate ladder, you get your 2% raise, and you fall back in line and get your health care. And like, that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, thankfully I had some savings. And so I wasn't like petrified the day. I mean, I was traumatized, but not petrified that I wasn't going to be able to keep the lights on or the children fed.
Right.
And so, you know, I went through the motions of applying for jobs, but I could just feel my soul being sucked out of my body as I was sending these resumes into the abyss. And I'm just like, if this feels this bad, applying and kind of pretending that I care about these ridiculous businesses to get these jobs and try to get to that salary that I had like worked my way up to, I was like, oh, this feels bad, right? So feeling was really important, right? Getting out of my logical mind and seeing how I was actually feeling during that process. And so again, that's kind of when my light bulb went off and I was like, nobody works harder than I do. Like, I got this. Like, I'll give myself, you know, 6 to 12 months to see if this will work, and let me just go for it. And so it was separating this is the path, this is the map we were all given, right? You know, our generation in particular, we're just given this map of go to college, get a good paying job, stay with it, maybe jump around to work the corporate ladder, but just, you have to fall in line, right? They're going to pay you. You're going to be smart and they're going to pay you for it. And you're going to be safe and you're going to have a wonderful life. And I just started to realize that I really could not stand having my livelihood be in somebody else's hands. I realized that giving away that control was something that I couldn't like live with any further. So if I'm just going to kind of like encapsulate how I knew my intuition was talking, it was just like a deep feeling within myself. And I had to put the logic aside and go with the feeling. And, you know, 8 years later, you know, I run a $1 million business, which is phenomenal. And it feels like, geez, you know, you can't hindsight's 2020, but man, I wish I believed in myself a lot sooner.
Yes. I love what you were saying about the knowing. Can you describe what it feels like in your body? Because oftentimes, you know, your intuition will tell you something and then fear like smacks you right away. So can you share with us how it feels for you in your body and maybe how fear feels different?
Sure. I wish I could remember where I heard this, and I even Googled it before we met to see if I could give credit where it was due. But I'm an avid learner. I listen to books all the time. I'm a huge student of human behavior. And so I'm always trying to learn more about myself and other people and how we all interact together. Sure. And so one of the things that I've heard along the way that like stopped me dead in my tracks, and it was finally like the light bulb really went off, was emotions are loud, but your intuition is quiet. And I remember, I think it was an audiobook. I paused it and I rewound it and I was like, emotions are loud and your intuition is quiet. So intuition, gut, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, man, that is so true. Because our emotions are so loud, that subconscious chirping in your ear, because your subconscious is designed to keep you safe.
Right.
The fear is designed to keep you safe. It's not meant to keep you small or keep you in things that aren't designed that are not the best for you. It's designed to keep you safe. And it's working hard to keep you safe, but oftentimes that safety isn't really what's going to be best for us in the long run. So to answer your question, I was feeling it, and I actually, again, because I use my children as my guinea pigs, is I ask them these types of questions. I was just having this conversation with my 10-year-old daughter. I'm like, where do you feel it? And she'll tell me she can feel it in like her cheeks and her neck and her chest. But I'm like literally more of like center of my body type of person, where my body is just like, it almost feels like it's contracting. Like I feel the energy and it's contracting. It's that's telling me that this is not the right like path.
Okay. Yes. Yep.
And so I, you know, again, I feel like it is different for everybody, but that is kind of how I know that something is not right for me. And then, you know, as far as like diminishing the fear, I also kind of live by this mantra of like fear or faith, you choose. And so you can either believe in the fear or you can believe in the faith. And really, the only thing that's going to tell is time. So I do, at least I've practiced this enough to be able to sit back and be like, okay, so what am I afraid of? Or what are the possible outcomes that I'm worried about as I'm making these decisions? And so that's how I kind of combat like, okay, what is my body telling me? And I think emotions are in our head, whereas like your body is kind of that intuitive guide of what is good for you. What's the right path for you? Maybe not good. What's the right path for you?
Mhm. That's phenomenal. And what I've experienced in, with all the women I've spoken to and personally, it is a contraction when your intuition is saying no, that's not the way to go. Whether it's in your chest or like for me it feels like a little turning in my stomach, like don't go that way.
Hmm.
So it's definitely a contraction. That's great. And I know when things are for me, and of course, like you said, it's hindsight, right? You just have to go with it and see what happens. But without fail, if it feels expansive, if it feels light and airy and open, even if the fear is screaming, like you said, the emotions are louder. If I follow my gut, it always works out and better than I could have even imagined. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah. So, what do you feel the barriers are for women specifically in following their intuition?
Society's indoctrination of how we should be acting. Um, it's just, I actually finally broke down and watched that Barbie movie. I was on a plane and I was like, let's hear about the hype, right? And I actually thought it was really cute and funny and everything like that. But America Ferrera's speech about like the contradictory position that women are in, I think is 100% true.
Yeah.
And I'm in a wonderful, loving, balanced relationship right now. And I have these conversations with him and he's like, I get it. I agree with you. It's kind of like such a double standard of all the pressures that are on women. And so we are expected to be, Martha Stewart, Susie Homemaker, but also, be some like boss babe running your own like gazillion-dollar enterprise. And frankly, that leaves no room to actually exist. That's kind of my opinion, right? It's like
What a
if you
great
are
way to put
all
that.
if you are all things to all other people, then who are you to yourself? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my awakening that I've been going through in the last 5 to 10 years. And I would say that like a real big pivotal point for me is when I got divorced, right? Early marriage, was married for, 10 years, was, my college sweetheart. And that whole unraveling process and really identifying who I was like, holy cow, the most revolutionary experience. And I'm actually surprised that it still continues to go on. Now I'm in my mid 40s and I'm like, okay, like I'm still learning about myself. All that
Mm.
being said is like, we're so shoehorned into perfection, politeness, all of these things that are kind of like unattainable for a lifelong existence, that you don't get a choice, right? And by choice, I mean you get to follow your gut because you're so like forced into these paths. Or that's,
Mm.
again, that's at least my experience, family of origin, socioeconomic upbringing. It's like, no, you're gonna go do all these things. You're gonna have your family, you're gonna, do all the things for them. And you should also be, don't rely on a man and get your own job and make your own money. And it's like, like it just leaves no room for you to like take stock of what you want or what is good for you. So I think just that you have to do it all feeling is a barrier for us to be able to follow our intuition. What do we like? What are we good at? I mean, I always come from the foundation of, for me anyway, my parents did the best they could with the tools that they had. So, zero disparaging things to say about my parents, but they came from, a society where like it was paycheck to paycheck. It wasn't a lot of wiggle room for wanting more. And so when I was a little kid and passionate about dancing, nobody ever said like, you could do that. Yeah, like that would be great. You should follow that path and see where it leads you. It was like, okay, what'd you get on the math test? And are you going to, make sure that that gets you into the right college someday? And so, and maybe that is a gift that's given to, I don't know, certain groups that you can just follow your dreams. But that is a little bit about what intuition is, right? Feeling light, doing what lights you up, filling your day with things that you care about instead of what you're kind of obligated to do. And to be honest, right, who knows where that would have led me if I was able just to kind of like go on this fun escapade in my early 20s and do something like that. I'm not sure. But even now, right, I've been doing this for nearly 10 years. And then I ask myself now on a regular basis, am I still loving this? What don't I love about it? Can I offload that? If I can't offload it, am I willing to keep doing these same types of tasks and responsibilities? And if I'm not, how do I have to shift my career path going forward? So I think it's just like a constant conversation with yourself. And I think that is a luxury.
I agree that it's a luxury, but I also think the times when I know at least for me, when I've taken that step to, and you were talking about this earlier, faith, I think it takes an element of faith to follow your intuition because you don't know ahead of time. And even like, no matter how many times we follow it, we're like, is this going to be the one time when it's not going to work out, But I think, a lot of us have been in the position where we really didn't have the luxury. Like you said, you were newly divorced, lost your job, 3 little kids. It wasn't really a luxury to follow your gut. It was a scary leap that you had. Now, yes, I know, and I'm not trying to diminish that we do have privilege. Absolutely we do. I just know for me, the fears have been very loud and real and made me feel like I didn't have privilege. Fully acknowledging that I do. But I didn't, to me, there was no net. And so I think what you said about faith earlier is equally as important. Like if you don't have that faith, at least one time to trust your gut, then, you don't learn all of these things that you've learned.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to have some faith in yourself. And I think if nothing else too, like that faith has to come from something, right? Are you dedicated to whatever? And are you okay with the outcome? So I think one of the things that I've also adapted as I've kind of moved through life is you never really fail, you just learn. And so I don't feel, well, let's just say that real estate was a colossal disaster. I hated working with people. People didn't like me, whatever, right? Fill in the blanks. And who knows, but that wouldn't have been a failure. Like I didn't fail at a career. I just learned that that wasn't the best use of my skills. Maybe that led to an introduction to something, a slide into a slightly tangential, profession. And so I don't really feel that there is failure. I just think that there's lessons. And so as I've gotten older, that actually does help me make decisions. And I'm like, okay, so we're either going to, win or we're going to learn. Right. And those are kind of the only outcomes we have. And I'm okay with whichever one it goes to. The beauty of kind of having a few decades of working and stuff like that under my belt is, that even if something was a colossal failure, didn't work out, you can pivot and get back to where you were really fast because nobody can ever take away what you've already learned. So everything, all the decades of learning is like, okay, that didn't work, but let's pivot because now we learned something else. And how do we put 10, 20, 30 years of learning to work in a different direction? So I have less fear of failure at this point.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, whether it's maybe something about intuitive parenting or maybe more intuitive business tips, anything at all that you think women would benefit from?
Well, I'm a reformed perfectionist, and I've realized that life is far more interesting, and you gain a deeper connection when you're not striving for some fake level of perfection. And part of that has been letting go of control. And I think perfectionism and control, those things are kind of intertwined. And so that also ties into like letting go and letting things unfold the way they should naturally unfold instead of, again, like shoehorning everything in. And so as I've let go of the perfectionism, let go of control, kind of observed instead of feeling like I needed to always be in the driver's seat, and kind of just allowing things to, like I said, unfold the way they're going to, has been a real relief over the years. So that is one thing that I think I love for people to be able to learn through me, or maybe it resonates with them in the sense that they're like, yeah, I am always trying to control everything. I'm always trying to drive the bus. I'm trying to influence people that I can't influence, right? I mean,
Right.
we cannot control everything that goes on around us. We can control ourselves and how we can react to things. But other than that, like putting out energy into the universe of trying to control things that are outside of your control is just kind of like, I don't go there anymore.
Yeah. I love observation and surrender. Those are the two big words that I picked up from what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
The less I try to force, and that's one of the messages I try to get out with my fierce feminine brand, is like fierce is not forcing anything. Fierce is like sitting with yourself and observing and surrendering. Like that's the whole thing. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. I think too, as far, it's been interesting to kind of now roll through the decades and see how I've changed as a person, but how that's impacted who I am as a parent as well. So I absolutely use intuitive parenting when it comes to my children. So listening to them, like I feel like our generation wasn't necessarily listened to. We were the like, you can be seen and not heard type of kids. But I really listened to their opinion. And one of the kind of agreements that I have with my oldest, who's a freshman in high school, is I will always hear you all the way out. Like, I will not interrupt you. You can tell me every single thing on a certain topic. I want to hear your opinion and why you want to make a certain decision, if you will do the same for me. So you share everything you want to share on a decision, and then I'm going to give you my adult perspective, and we're going to completely hear each other out, and then we're going to come to a decision together. And so that allowing them to be seen and heard, I think, has, number one, improved our relationship tremendously. But I'm learning about them, and then they get to learn about me. And instead of us competing over who's going to make a decision, right? Because that's a rub in parenting as your kids get older. We feel like we're collaborating. So the other thing too is I got this great middle son who is like such a cool kid, but man, he cannot keep himself out of trouble. So like he's like literally the same day he made honor roll, he got suspended for throwing a metal water bottle. And I'm like, man, this kid gives me a run for my money. And his vice principal calls me and she's like, I know. She's like, I don't know what to do with him. He's so polite. He's so funny. He's such a good student. But he cannot avoid the laugh. Like he's always looking for the laugh. He always pushes the limits of like where he's allowed to go, be, do. But I'll just sit down and I'll think to myself, like, what's the correct response? And so I get quiet and I listen to myself. And my emotions are saying, like, kids are supposed to get in trouble when they get suspended. Kids are supposed to do this and that. And like, you as a parent are supposed to enforce this and be rigid. But I'm like, instead, we have conversations about these types of things. And now, there was more conversation than just like, you better know, better. But for the purpose of this discussion is I have to weigh who he is as a person versus this one incident. And so my intuition is telling me he already feels bad. like he knows, he gets it. He doesn't need to have me come down on him harder. And I'm trying to let my children know we are the safe space. The world is going to kick your butt, and you can come back to us and be your safe space when you do make a mistake, not the, rule with an iron fist and you're going to learn your lesson from us too.
Right.
So that is completely different than I grew up. And again, I was a pretty good kid. I don't know if I was scared into being a good kid or what the deal was. I really didn't get into a lot of trouble per se, but I kind of was afraid of my parents, like maybe by their doing or my own decision, but like I didn't want to upset them or disappoint them or anything like that. So the conversations that I have with my kids are just completely different than I was ever kind of modeled growing up.
Those are great examples of intuitive parenting. Thank you for that. I would say I parent very similarly to you, and I was also never in trouble and terrified of my parents. And like they never hit me, like that was never a thing, but it was, if my dad just raised his eyebrow a certain way, I was like and the internalization of all that, I think, is part of what you were talking about, where we were shoehorned. Like we couldn't even make mistakes. We were where we were supposed to feel safe. So this new way of using your gut to parent, I mean, what a game changer for generations to come. It's so powerful.
Well, and I think it's all wrapped up for me anyway, is the permission to be imperfect and make mistakes in a loving environment is the thing that I was missing, that made me kind of follow this prescribed path that wasn't necessarily what I really wanted. Is I think that there was not permission to be imperfect and make mistakes. And therefore I was like, okay, I'm just going to follow the path that I was told to go down, because that seems like what's going to make everybody else around me happy. So again, like kind of giving my kids permission to make mistakes, be imperfect, but still know that they're lovable, and, encourage them to start listening to themselves. And then we just have discussions. If they make a bad decision, like we can decide that they're going to make the decision. If it's a bad decision, we circle back around to, and we're like, okay, what did we learn?
Yes.
So I think sometimes we have to be our own safe space. So I'm creating a safe space for my kids, my family, but we need to end up being our own safe space as adults. So,
and how much easier is it though for people to do that for themselves when they've already had that space held? Like, I think our kids, it's going to be so much easier for them to be their own safe space because they've had it modeled. I mean, it took us decades and so much therapy and coaching because we didn't have it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all of your insight and wisdom. I know so many women are going to benefit from this. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, can you share with me the best way? And then I'll share the rest in the show notes.
Yeah. So if you go to my website, it's called rachnh.com. So rachnh.com. That's the website. It's not going anywhere. Super easy to remember from there. You can get all of my contact information, all of our socials, but that's nice and easy to remember.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. It was lovely seeing you.
I know. It was lovely seeing you too.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. If you feel that this episode will help another woman, please share it. Until next time.